Let me ask you something. Why is it that the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop calling, the moment you go silent, that's when he starts thinking about you? Why is it that after all the times you were there for him, the moment you finally decide to put yourself first, he suddenly remembers what he had? See, men don't always realize what they've lost when they have it. They don't always appreciate love when it's freely given. They take warmth for granted until they're left in the cold. At first, he walks away thinking he's in control. He believes he made the right decision, that space is what he needed, that he'll be just fine without you. But something happens when you give a man the gift of silence. That space he wanted, it starts to feel empty. That freedom he thought he needed, it starts to feel like loneliness. And that's when it hits him. Maybe he had something rare, something real, something he'll never find again. And just like that, the same man who walked away, the same man who ignored you, who took you for granted, is now trying to find his way back. When a man is always around, his presence becomes familiar, expected. The effort he once made fades into routine. And slowly, what was once exciting turns into something ordinary. It's not that he stops caring, but he stops noticing. He stops appreciating. And that's because the human mind is wired to overlook what feels constant. It's only when something disappears that we start to feel its weight. This is exactly why no contact can be so powerful. When you remove yourself from the equation, you shift the entire dynamic. A man who was once used to having access to you now finds himself faced with something unfamiliar. Silence. He doesn't get to hear your voice, doesn't see your name pop up on his phone, doesn't feel your energy filling up the space around him. That absence creates a void, and that void forces him to confront a reality he hadn't considered. Life without you. In the beginning, he may not even notice. He may assume it's temporary, that you'll eventually reach out, but as time passes, something starts to shift. That lack of contact does something to his mind. He starts to remember the little things, how you used to check in on him, the way you laughed at his jokes, the warmth of your presence when life got tough. These memories aren't forced. They creep up on him in the quiet moments. And it's in those moments that he realizes he had something valuable, something he took for granted. Men, by nature, are often wired to chase. The thrill of pursuit is what excites them. But when something is always available, that chase loses its appeal. There's no urgency, no reason to put in the effort. But when something disappears, that's when the chase reignites. Because now, instead of feeling in control, he feels a loss. And that loss makes him question everything. At first, he may try to suppress it. He may tell himself he doesn't care, that he's better off. But no contact is powerful because it removes the distractions. He doesn't have you around to comfort him, to reassure him, to fill in the gaps where he lacks emotional depth. So now he sits with his own thoughts. And the longer he sits, the more he begins to wonder, did I make a mistake? That question alone is what triggers a man to return, because he starts to evaluate what he truly had. It's not just about missing you. It's about realizing that he had something good and let it go. And here's the key. When a man believes he's losing something valuable, he will do whatever it takes to get it back. This is why pulling away works. It forces him to see your worth, not because you said it, but because he experienced the loss of it firsthand. It's the absence that makes him realize how much presence mattered. When he no longer has access to your kindness, your time, your love, he suddenly recognizes just how rare it was. But not every return is genuine. Some men come back simply because they don't like losing, not because they're ready to change. And this is why understanding your own worth is key. No contact isn't about playing games. It's about giving yourself the space to see who truly values you. If a man returns, it should be because he recognizes your worth, not because he's afraid of losing control. Absence creates value. When something is always there, it's easy to overlook. But the moment it's gone, its importance becomes undeniable. And that is why men return after no contact, not because you chased, but because you let them feel what life was like without you. When a man is surrounded by someone's presence every day, he rarely stops to reflect on what that presence truly means. He enjoys the comfort, the affection, the emotional support, but because it's always there, he doesn't take the time to analyze its depth. He moves through the relationship without fully understanding what it adds to his life. That's just how the human mind works. We often don't pause to appreciate something until it's no longer in front of us. The moment no contact begins, everything shifts. There is no more daily check-in, no warmth, no loving energy making things feel whole. Instead, there is space, empty, quiet, unfamiliar. And in that space, reflection begins. At first, he may not even realize it's happening. He might go about his day as usual, filling his time with distractions, convincing himself that nothing has changed. But in those moments when he's alone, when the noise of the outside world fades, something unexpected happens. His mind drifts back to you, He starts remembering things, not in a forced way, but in flashes. The way you used to listen when he spoke about his dreams. The little things you did that made his life easier. The way you looked at him when you were proud. Or the way your laughter could make even the worst days feel lighter. These memories don't just bring back moments, they bring back emotions. And emotions have a way of settling in deeper than logic ever could. This reflection isn't just about nostalgia, it's about realization. Without the constant presence of your love, he starts to see what it actually meant to him. The kindness he once took for granted now feels like something he can't find elsewhere. The patience you showed, the understanding you offered, he starts to recognize how rare that is. And suddenly, the absence of it becomes loud. It creates an ache, an emptiness he didn't expect. But it doesn't stop there. The more he reflects, the more he starts questioning himself. Did he give as much as he took? Did he appreciate what he had when he had it? Did he push away something that was actually good for him? These thoughts don't come all at once, but they build over time. They chip away at his certainty, making him second-guess decisions he was once so sure about. And then there's the fear. The fear that you're not just silent, you're moving on. That while he's sitting in his thoughts, you might be out there realizing you deserve more. That fear makes him reflect even harder, because now it's not just about missing you, it's about what it means if he loses you for good. This is where a shift happens. When he first walked away, he may have felt in control, like he had all the time in the world. But reflection has a way of turning that feeling upside down. He starts to realize that time isn't on his side, that the longer he waits, the more he risks. And that's when the urge to reach out grows stronger, not just because he misses you, but because he now understands just how much you brought into his life. Reflection is a powerful force. It makes people see things they once ignored. It forces them to confront emotions they tried to bury. And when a man has the space to truly sit with his thoughts, he can no longer hide from the truth that losing someone like you wasn't just a choice. It might have been the biggest mistake he ever made. When a man walks away from a relationship, he often does so with a sense of control. Whether it was his choice to leave or he pushed you away through his actions, in his mind, he believes he has the upper hand. He assumes that if he ever wants to come back, he can. That door will be open, that space will be waiting, that power will still be his. But no contact disrupts that illusion. The moment you pull away and refuse to engage, something shifts inside him. At first, he might not notice. He may even feel relieved, thinking that the separation is what he wanted. He expects you to reach out, to check in, to try to mend what's broken. That's what he's banking on. Your emotional investment still being strong enough to keep him at the center of your world. When that doesn't happen, a discomfort begins to build. It's not just about missing you, it's about something deeper. The realization that he no longer holds the same influence over you. And for many men, that realization is unsettling. It shakes something inside them because it challenges the belief they've held on to, that they are the ones in control of the situation. For some men, control in a relationship isn't always about manipulation or power in a toxic way. It's about reassurance. They want to feel like they are the center of someone's attention, that no matter what happens, they will always be a priority. The moment that reassurance is gone, panic sets in. They don't just question their feelings for you, they start questioning themselves. If she's not reaching out, does that mean she's moving on? If she's not reacting, does that mean I don't matter anymore? It's where the ego comes into play. A bruised ego is a powerful motivator. When a man realizes that his absence doesn't affect you the way he expected, he starts to crave validation. He needs to know that he still has some level of control, that he can still elicit a response from you, that he hasn't truly been forgotten. This is when you may notice small attempts to regain that control, random messages, sudden social media activity, indirect attempts to get your attention. It's not always love that drives these actions. Sometimes it's simply a need to confirm that the power he once had over you still exists. But for other men, the realization cuts deeper. It's not just about ego. It's about facing a truth they hadn't been willing to acknowledge. They begin to see that maybe they weren't as in control as they thought. That maybe, just maybe, they needed you more than they admitted. And that's when the internal battle begins. Do they return simply to soothe their wounded pride? Or do they return because they genuinely understand your worth now? No contact forces a man to sit with these questions. Without your presence feeding his ego, he has to confront the reality of what life feels like without you. The comfort, the stability, the emotional connection, it's all gone. And he no longer has the ability to dictate when or how it returns. That's a powerful shift, one that forces him to reevaluate everything. And here's the real turning point: what he chooses to do with that realization. Some men will come back simply to reestablish control, to make sure they still have access to you, others will come back. Because they've done the deeper work, because they understand what they lost and are willing to prove they deserve another chance. The difference is in their actions, and whether they come back as the same person or as someone who has grown from the experience. At the heart of it, ego and control are fragile things. When you take away a man's ability to feel in control of a situation, you expose what's real, his true emotions, his fears, and ultimately whether he values you enough to return for the right reasons. When a relationship ends or distance grows between two people, men often assume that time is on their side. They believe that even if things are rocky now, they'll always have a window of opportunity to come back when they're ready. This belief makes them feel secure in their decision to walk away or to put in less effort. But no contact changes that. It introduces an element of uncertainty that wasn't there before. At first, he may not feel the effects. He may even feel relief, believing that stepping away was the right move. He assumes that if he ever wants to return, the option will still be available. But as time passes and you remain silent, an unsettling thought starts creeping in. What if she's moving on? This is where fear begins to take hold. It's no longer just about missing you. It's about the possibility of losing you for good. He starts to realize that you are not just waiting around for him to make up his mind. The longer you stay silent, the more real this possibility becomes in his mind. Every day that goes by without a message, without an attempt to reach out, the more he wonders if he has miscalculated. In his mind, the idea of you moving on isn't just about you finding someone else. It's about the loss of access. It's about realizing that the connection he once took for granted is slipping away, and for the first time, he is no longer in control of the outcome. He can't predict what you're thinking, can't gauge your emotions, can't rely on the idea that he has time. And that lack of control, that's what makes him panic. He starts imagining scenarios that he never considered before. Who is she talking to now? Is she going on dates? Has she realized she's better off without me? Every time he opens his phone and doesn't see a message from you, that fear grows. And this fear is amplified when he sees you carrying on with your life, when he notices that you're not dwelling, that you're not chasing, that you are in fact perfectly fine without him. This realization forces him to reflect on what he had. He remembers the way you supported him, the effort you put into making things work, the small ways you made his life better. At the time, he may have thought these things were just part of the relationship, things that would always be there, but now he sees them for what they were. Things that came from you and you alone. And if you've moved on, he knows he might never experience them again. That's when the fear shifts into urgency. The thought of losing you isn't just painful, it's motivating. He starts wondering if he still has a chance, if it's too late to fix what was broken. He debates reaching out, finding an excuse to check in, testing the waters to see if the door is still open. Every day he waits, the fear of being replaced grows stronger, pushing him closer to action. But not every return is driven by love. Some men come back simply because they don't want to lose their safety net. They don't necessarily want to put in the work, but they want to make sure you're still an option. Others come back because the fear has made them realize how much you actually meant to them. The difference between these two types of men is in how they approach their return, whether they come back with real effort or just enough to keep you from moving on completely. In the end, fear is a powerful motivator. The moment a man realizes that he might not be able to come back whenever he pleases, that's when he starts questioning everything. And the stronger you stand in your silence, the more that fear pushes him to face the reality of what he lost. When a man walks away from a relationship, he often does so with a sense of certainty. In that moment, he believes he's making the right choice, whether it's because he feels overwhelmed, unsure, or simply not ready for commitment. He tells himself that he needs space, that things weren't working, or that he'll be better off on his own. But what he doesn't realize is that walking away isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a process he hasn't fully understood yet. At first, the separation feels like freedom. He no longer has to navigate the complexities of the relationship, doesn't have to answer to anyone, doesn't have to think about compromises. He fills his time with distractions, diving into work, hobbies, or even new connections. He convinces himself that he's doing fine, that this is what he wanted. But the human mind has a way of catching up with the heart, and eventually the distractions fade. That's when personal growth and regret start to take root. Without the constant presence of the relationship, he is forced to sit with himself. And for many men, this is an unfamiliar and uncomfortable place to be. In a relationship, it's easy to avoid self-reflection because there's always someone there to share the burden, to talk things through, to provide emotional support. But when he's alone, there's no one else to blame, no one else to lean on, no one else to lead on. He has to face his own thoughts, his own mistakes, his own shortcomings. This process isn't immediate. At first, he might push away the thoughts, telling himself he was right to leave, that things weren't working. But over time, the memories start to resurface. Not just the good times, but the ways he may have contributed to the downfall of the relationship. He begins to question his actions, replaying moments where he could have been more understanding, more patient, more present. He starts to see the effort you put in, the love you gave, the way you supported him in ways he never fully appreciated. And regret doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, in quiet moments, when he least expects it. Maybe he hears a song that reminds him of you. Maybe he goes to a place where you once shared a moment. Maybe he sees you moving on, living your life without him, and it hits him in a way he didn't anticipate. He realizes that while he was focused on his own needs, he failed to recognize what he had in you, and now he's not so sure if walking away was the right decision after all. The most significant shift happens when he begins to grow from this realization. Some men get stuck in regret, feeling sorry for themselves, but never taking action to change. But others use that regret as a catalyst for growth. They start to reflect on who they were in the relationship versus who they want to be. They begin to understand the value of emotional maturity, communication, and accountability. They recognize the role they played in the dynamic and start working on becoming a better version of themselves. And this is where the decision comes in. Does he return to try and make things right, or does he stay in his regret? For a man who has truly grown, his return isn't just about missing you. It's about proving that he has changed, that he understands his past mistakes, and that he is willing to do the work. But for others, regret is simply a painful reminder of what they lost, without the willingness to take real action. When a man realizes that he let go of something valuable, it changes him. It forces him to confront his choices, his growth, and whether he is willing to take responsibility for his actions. Whether or not he returns, that realization leaves a lasting impact, shaping how he approaches relationships moving forward. When a man experiences the absence of someone who was once a central part of his life, he goes through a process of emotional reconnection that he never anticipated. At first, he may believe that he can move forward without looking back, that time and distance will make the separation easier. But what he doesn't realize is that emotions are not logical, and the heart has a way of pulling people back toward what once felt like home. In the silence of no contact, memories start to resurface in ways he didn't expect. At first, they may be fleeting, small moments that pass through his mind without much weight. Maybe it's the sound of a certain song, the scent of a familiar perfume, or a place that once held meaning. But as time goes on, those memories become stronger. He starts to feel the warmth of what he once had, the depth of the connection, and the way your presence made him feel understood in a way no one else did. The emotional reconnection happens gradually. It isn't something he plans for or even wants at first, but emotions don't follow a schedule. He might have thought he had moved on, that the breakup was final, that the chapter was closed. Yet, in moments of quiet, he finds himself drawn back to the feelings he once had, the laughter, the late-night conversations, the way you supported him through his struggles. All of it starts to feel more significant now that it's gone. As the emotions deepen, he begins to realize that what he felt for you never truly disappeared. Perhaps he suppressed it, convinced himself that separation was the right decision, or assumed that time would weaken the bond. But now, in your absence, the feelings he buried begin to surface with more intensity. He starts questioning whether he was too quick to let go, whether he misjudged the depth of his own emotions, whether he mistook temporary frustrations for something irreversible. This reconnection isn't just about missing someone. It's about realizing how much they truly mattered. It's about understanding that the love, support, and connection weren't just conveniences. They were rare and valuable. And when a man comes to this realization, he starts to see the relationship in a new light. He looks past the arguments and imperfections and instead focuses on the core of what you shared, the way you made him feel safe, the way you understood him without words, the way you were there when no one else was. The deeper the emotional reconnection, the stronger the urge becomes to reach out. He wants to know if the feelings are still mutual, if the bond still exists, if he still has a place in your life. But more than that, he starts to realize that he doesn't just want to relive the past. He wants another chance to do things differently. Because now he understands that love isn't something that can be replaced easily. However, not every man who reconnects emotionally will act on it. Some will hesitate, afraid of rejection, uncertain if they deserve another chance. Others will take that reconnection as a sign that they need to make things right, that they need to prove they've grown, that they need to fight for what they once walked away from. Emotional reconnection is powerful because it doesn't rely on logic or circumstance. It's not about convenience or timing. It's about something deeper. When a man finds himself drawn back to the feelings he once had, it's because those feelings never truly left. They were waiting for the silence to remind him of what he had all along. So, here we are. The same man who once walked away, who thought he had all the time in the world, who believed you would always be there, he's back. But the question isn't why he returned. The question is, what will you do now? See, silence is powerful. It forces a man to sit with his choices, to face his own emotions, to realize what he had and what he lost. But just because he comes back doesn't mean he's changed. Just because he misses you doesn't mean he deserves another chance. Some men return out of love, ready to prove themselves, willing to grow. Others return out of fear, fear of losing access, fear of being replaced, fear of seeing you happy without them. That's where your power lies, because this time, you're not waiting. You're not begging. You're not proving your worth to someone who couldn't see it before. You are the one who decides. Whether you take him back or walk away for good, the choice is yours. Because the real lesson here isn't about why men return, it's about why you never needed him to come back in the first place.